Hello. Hi. I'm Vicki, and I'm a product designer at Headspace. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a little nervous, so just play along, please, if I ask you questions. So, quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of Headspace? Wow, that's a lot. I wasn't expecting that many. And who here has meditated before? It doesn't have to be with Headspace. Okay, so maybe half as many. So for all of you who didn't raise your hand, who are new to meditation, you might think meditation is something like this, right? Like monks sitting serenely on mountaintops, maybe just completely no thoughts and being like Zen, whatever that means, right? Or maybe you think of these like stacked rocks, or pools of water with ripples in them. I don't actually know where these images come from, but they are what you think of when you think of meditation. And maybe this all makes you think, meditation isn't for me. I don't do yoga, I'm not, Zen, I'm like fast-paced, and I'm not just the type to meditate. But that's not what meditation is. As I understand it, meditation is just about being aware of your thoughts. You're not trying to turn them off. You're not trying to have any feelings, like those are totally okay. You're just trying to observe them without judgment. So I thought it would be great if we could all together do one of Headspace's 3-minute mini meditations. And so don't be scared if you've never done it before. You just kind of have to sit there and listen to what Andy says. Tell you a little bit more about who Andy is later. So I will be up here doing it with you. I'll get a chair. And there's no wrong way to do it. This little thing will be up here to start. You don't have to look at it, but if you don't want to close your eyes, it's something for you to follow along to. I've never done this before. Okay.
So take a moment to sit comfortably. And when you're ready, just taking 3 nice big deep breaths, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, that idea of taking in fresh air, the lungs expanding. And as you breathe out, just noticing how the muscles in the body soften and relax. And with your third out breath, just gently closing the eyes. And just feeling the weight of the body pressing down against a chair. And as you pause, just still for a moment, just noticing the movement of breath in the body. Notice where in the body you feel that rising and falling sensation. Can't feel anything, you can just gently place your hand on the stomach. There's some people feel it around the chest, the shoulders. For other people it's the diaphragm or the stomach. There's no right or wrong place to feel the breath. Just noticing where it is. And starting to notice the rhythm of the breath. Whether the breaths are fast, slow, whether they're deep or shallow. So nothing to do, not breathing in any special way. Just following the natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing when the mind has wandered off. Then gently coming back again to that rising and falling sensation. And when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
All right, so I'm just gonna slide this. Thank you. How did that feel? It was kind of weird for me up here, but does anyone feel better? Yeah? Does anyone feel worse? Like, was that really hard? So, meditation is hard, at least at first, and it doesn't always feel good. And so that's the challenge. It's sticking with it until it starts to feel good. So that's really what my job is all about. So some of you might also have been wondering, who was that pleasant British voice actor that we hired to record all of our meditations? Now that's actually Andy, and he's one of Headspace's co-founders. And his story is really interesting. So about 20 years ago, when Andy was in university, he was going through a really tough time. I'm sure all of us have had one of those times, unfortunately, and instead of turning to his friends or maybe family or even, hitting the bottle, he decided to go to the Himalayas to study meditation. And he traveled the world for about 10 years and was kind of learning at different monasteries, and this all ended in him becoming a Tibetan monk in India. And so it was out there that Andy had learned that the East had figured out something that the West desperately needed. So he went back to London and he opened up a little clinic teaching meditation. He thought, if he could teach people, he could help the world and everyone would be better. And that's where he met our co-founder, Rich. So he's the not bald guy. And together they had the idea to start doing meditation events. They thought they could help many more people that way. And Rich, he was business-minded, so this was kind of his idea. So the very first version of Headspace was actually these cards that they handed out at the meditation events. It's really cool to see that original logo. That's kind of where the dot comes from. See the dot in this little guy's head. It was a little bit creepy because he was a naked guy, so we ended up removing the body. But the cards taught you how to sit, how to breathe, and just how to meditate. So if you'll fast forward a few years later and a few app versions later, you'll see the Headspace that we have today. We recommend that everyone starts with something called the basics. It's just these 10 free sessions that anyone can do. It's plain. And then if you don't have enough time for something like that, you can do a mini meditation. That's what we just did. And if you want to go deeper on something after that, you can try a pack on sleep or stress or whatever it is that you're interested in. So I just gave you a bunch of context. Oops. And I demystified meditation a little. I talked about what it is and what it isn't. And I explained who Andy is. Told you a little bit about the structure of the Headspace app and the different things we have to offer. So that was kind of our challenge. In moving from an in-person event, it's very much like this, Andy teaching meditation, to a digital product, we needed to do all of that, but on your phone in much less time with much less attention. Just playing again. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a case study of our onboarding redesign, but this story is really about us as humans and how we have this special ability to make connections and fill in the gaps. By the end of this talk, I hope you'll understand the power of other methods of reasoning, aside from data, that can inform how we make decisions and how we design. So first, I'll start where we started about 6 months ago, with data. So this was our original onboarding flow. You'll see on the right the kind of percentage of users that reach each screen, and along the bottom, I'll call out the drop-off. We welcome by reassuring new users that it's okay if they're new, similar to what I did, and that we're here to guide them. So each of these kind of warm-up screens, you'll see a drop-off about 1%. And then we ask users to watch an animated video. And this kind of goes through the same thing that Andy would go through at the events, or those cards would go through. It tells you kind of how to sit, how to breathe, and things like that. But we found that a lot of users were skipping this video. I mean, you're often downloading apps when you're in line or kind of, when you're bored at work. Don't tell your boss. But, we found that a lot of people weren't watching this. So we do one more warm-up card, and then we ask you to jump right into your first meditation. We see that 34% of them, new users, don't even begin this meditation, and another 18.4 don't even finish. So that leaves us with about just 38% of new users completing their first meditation during the onboarding. So these onboarding numbers are the percentages or the numbers of users who reach each step. And that's interesting, but what we really care about are the number of users who come back later, who come back to meditate, whether it's later that day or later that week or in the weeks after. I think this is called retention. Product managers might know more about it. So here we've got about 38% of users meditating during that onboarding session. Over the course of week 1, we see another half as many more come back. So there's something going on there where maybe they thought about it, maybe they were in line and they weren't ready to meditate, but they came back. But by week 2, we're seeing this huge drop, all the way down to probably about half. So in the following weeks, incremental drop-off, I think that's expected. But something was happening here in week 2. We saw that users that did meditate in week 2, even if they didn't meditate in week 1, were much more engaged. So much so that they were 5 times more likely to convert to a paid subscription. And so for us, that's really important. So improving this number, I'll call it week 2 retention or week 2 engagement, going forward was going to be our biggest opportunity. So great. We had all this data. We knew where users were dropping off. We set off to redesign the onboarding. What could go wrong? I feel like Ariel and everyone before you has already primed you, but play along with me. So our first hypothesis was that, based on the data, maybe users were annoyed that we were blocking them from entering the app and kind of making them go through this onboarding. They just wanted to see what Headspace was. So what we did was we just simply made the onboarding exitable. We added an X to every screen so that during onboarding you could just cancel out and go to the home screen. Pretty easy. Our second hypothesis was that maybe users just weren't excited about watching these videos. No one wants to watch instructional videos. And by skipping the videos, again, they weren't getting any of that useful information about how to get set up, how to sit. And so we created a flow that took all of that information from the video and just made it into a series of animated GIFs so that no one would have to watch a video. You wouldn't even need audio. You could just kind of passively absorb this stuff. And this was a much shorter and engaging sort of video, we hoped. Our next hypothesis was that maybe users, they all wanted to be onboarded in a different way. So maybe some wanted that instruction. Maybe some wanted to just meditate right away. And then maybe some just wanted to explore the app. So what we did was we created this interstitial screen that let users choose their own adventure out of those 3 options. And our last hypothesis was that maybe users were getting impatient, like an impatient eel. What are those? Because it was taking so long for their first session to download. Maybe they were on a slow connection and they just didn't want to wait. If you remember, we saw that huge drop-off before session 1 even began. So what we did was we just preloaded session 1 to include it with the app download so that there would be no waiting time and they could play their first meditation right away. So after we shipped these experiments, we monitored the numbers closely. We saw some very promising early indicators. With that animated GIF flow, we saw more people were going to session 1. And then our hypothesis was that if you had kind of meditated, you would be more likely to keep doing it. And by making onboarding exitable, we saw more users getting to the home screen. And our hope there was that seeing the home screen and kind of poking around would get them interested in meditating too. So these metrics, we call them leading indicators because they're sometimes correlated, but they can also result in false positives. So, nothing moved week 2 retention. And I mean, that's the limitation of data, right? It's just backwards looking. It can only describe what has happened, but it can't prescribe solutions for you. It turned out, maybe you already know this, but we were designing based on assumptions rather than underlying user needs. So we decided to take a step back to really figure out why users weren't coming back. And at Headspace, we're really lucky to have a team that many other companies don't have. Because we see meditation as a practice rooted in ancient kind of history, like what Andy learned in the monastery, and we see it as a topic of modern science, we have to be able to prove the efficacy of what we're claiming. We've got a dedicated science team that are constantly running studies about this stuff. So it was around this time that science team was wrapping up a goals and intentions study. And they were asking users, what are you hoping to experience in the long term, short term and long term using Headspace? And interestingly enough, we'd never asked users about this. We kind of gave them the app, we told them how to meditate, but we didn't do any of this. So on the right, you'll see a word cluster analysis of those participants' answers. And you'll see kind of words like stress, anxiety, and sleep showing up a lot. From this, we learned that users were really motivated by improving an area of their life, like those words, stressing less, sleeping better, or feeling calm. So this might sound fairly obvious, but I think if you look at the product and the onboarding we had at that moment, it didn't take into account any of this stuff. So it was kind of a key takeaway for us. And we also found that new users just find value in being asked about their goals. It helped them articulate and clarify why they were there at different journeys, at different points in their journey. And again, this might sound obvious, but I think there's this thing that happens where you hear about Headspace, you download the app, maybe you think you should meditate for some reason because you're so busy and kind of frantic, but you don't take the time to kind of really think about, well, what do I want to improve aside from kind of focus? So that was something really helpful that we learned from this study. Around this time, also, we have a design research team, and they were running a diary study that was looking at very high engaged users and low engaged users. We wanted to learn from users that had really, had a great time making meditation a practice for them, and we wanted to help those users that were struggling the most. I think this kind of is in line with what Ben and Ciara talked about, like, look at the extremes. And so what we found were that actually most of our users were just completely new to meditation, 83%. I think before then we didn't know whether or not some people were coming already with some understanding or if more of them were completely new. And on top of that, a lot of them didn't even know what meditation was. Again, they had just heard of it. So because of that, new users just needed way more guidance than we were providing. We just had those orange warm-up cards before each session, and I think users didn't find that was enough. They wanted much more reassurance as they were getting into the practice. Were they doing it right? When would they feel better? And last, most interesting to me was that time wasn't actually the biggest obstacle for them. I think a lot of times you hear people say, oh, I'm busy, I don't have any time. These users reported having up to 3 hours of free time. And it wasn't that, they didn't have the time, it was that they didn't know how to fit in healthy activities into that time. And we all know getting home from work, you sit down and you watch one episode of Netflix, and then a couple hours later, you're like, I'm still here on the couch. Headspace is just 10 minutes, and so it was weird to see that they had this much time, yet they couldn't fit in, this much sort of a healthy thing. So at this point, we started to see a lot of themes in what users were saying. They were saying things like, I forgot, or am I doing this right? I just ignore my reminders. I don't want to do it. And what should I feel? So that's when our trusty science team kind of reinserted themselves and gave us some advice. They told us that actually our problem with engagement and retention was actually just one of a habit formation problem. And had we looked at that? So for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm sure you all are because it's kind of been talked about a lot recently, but I'll use an example of something we hopefully all do every morning and night, brushing our teeth. So for brushing our teeth, the trigger is the thing that cues us to brush. This can be something like that mossy feeling on your teeth, on your tongue, or maybe even bad breath. If the trigger is good, it will kind of prompt us to take action. And so in this case, it can be brushing your teeth or maybe flossing. And then after you brush, the reward is that minty clean feeling on your teeth and your breath, and maybe, people act differently around you. Maybe they come closer. And so over time, you might invest. That might be starting to go to the dentist, or maybe you get like a nice, fancy toothbrush. And every time you use that toothbrush, your teeth feel even cleaner. So what we did was we mapped what we heard to this framework. And we found that we were lacking in every single step. Users weren't being motivated by our reminders. They weren't clear about what they were supposed to be doing, so it was hard for them to take action. They didn't know how they were supposed to feel or what they should be feeling or when they would be feeling better, so the reward was unclear. And we weren't helping them find time in their schedule to actually meditate, so they weren't able to invest in the product. So we came up with 4 new hypotheses that targeted each step of this loop. And if you remember, these are in contrast to our original data-driven hypotheses, which were a little more around just removing friction. So here we go with the videos again. Our first hypothesis was that intrinsic triggers would motivate users. So could we relate their meditation practice to their goal? We had already kind of gotten some good feedback from the science team. It seemed like a no-brainer. Did a movie play? For the action and reward steps, we thought that we could provide a little more guidance around when and how much they should meditate. Is it every day? Is that enough? Or is it 3 times a week? How much do you need to do? And set realistic expectations about when they would feel better. Is it going to take a week, a month, a year? So last, we also wanted to help users find time in their routine so that they could invest in the product. Whether that was in the morning when they were brushing their teeth, or maybe at night after dinner or before going to sleep. So now we were at a place that felt good. We kind of had used data as this jumping off point. We knew how we were going to measure success. We had used research to uncover insights, and we had learned from our users' successes and failures. And then we had also used behavioral science and this evidence-based framework of the habit formation loop to organize our approach. Everything felt really good. So equipped with these user-driven hypotheses, we set out to redesign the onboarding. But instead of jumping right into designing in Sketch or even by sketching, sorry, same words, we decided to test the concepts. So our very first round of user testing, there was no UI. We just asked participants to fill out these worksheets. So you'll see on the right that we asked users to circle what motivates them to meditate. These options we had gotten directly from that science study, and we saw that users were circling quite a few. On the left, you'll see we asked participants to just elaborate freeform about that goal. This participant wrote, "I want to manage my anxiety to the point where it doesn't disrupt my day as much as it does, and I'd love to hone my focus and quicken my comprehension time in daily life." So these were super interesting to read and talk through before we even began anything. We also asked users to read through these science tidbits about the benefits of meditation. You can see the influence of our science team coming in. We wondered if these would help set expectations for users. You'll see here that one participant circled 14%. And by talking to them, we learned that it's really hard for participants to understand what a 14% increase in performance means or a 19% decrease in anxiety looks like. And so we found that these science facts were really polarizing. Like, some people loved them. They were like, cool, that's like an exact thing that I can point my finger to and know I'll get to. And some, they got stuck on the details. Like, I don't know how much that is, and when will I get there, and does that apply to me, and can you show me the whole paper? So from there, we got started sketching the flow. It's finding a way to just give structure to all these different pieces that we kind of identified as being important. So you'll see the early bits of ideas included goals and maybe some benefits. We wanted to ask people about their experience level and maybe setting a schedule around meditating. And then last, some sort of summary that included this plan that they had told us. So it would give you like a roadmap for your meditation practice. So as we brought this into Sketch, we continued testing every week or so. We were getting mixed feedback about some stuff. One of them was the screen here. It was the question, how often do you plan to meditate? So some users liked that it was aspirational. They kind of liked setting that goal and the intention of sticking to it. But others felt like it was way too early to be asking. They hadn't even meditated yet. They didn't even know it was, and so they felt like it was really hard to know. Another thing that we kind of stumbled upon was in the goals section, where we asked them about their goals for coming to Headspace. We had included the ability to sample a meditation. We thought it'd be really cool for people to listen to like a sleep meditation if they were planning to improve their sleep, or maybe even a falling asleep single, because normally you have to kind of pass the basics to get to something like this. And so, again, we got lots of different feedback. We heard from some that it was really helpful to hear Andy's voice. I mean, some people love the British accent, and for one user, he said it was, it kind of reminded him of some pub fight he had gotten into. So I guess he comes from a bad part of town, I don't know. So some people loved that, some people hated it. And what was more important, I think, was some people mentioned that actually listening to that meditation right then made them want to just go and do a meditation, which is kind of cool, but we were trying to get them onboarded. So we had to think about this a little bit more. So we had our data, we had our research, but users were telling us conflicting things. What were we going to do? So I think more often than not, we have to make decisions with incomplete information, even with all these tools. And on top of that, kind of like what Ariel talked about, in a startup environment, you have to move fast. Time is a limited resource. And for us, there's like a new meditation app popping up every day, right? So we have to be comfortable making decisions with limited information. And that's where intuition comes in. So intuition is what helps us fill in those gaps and make those decisions, and what allows us to move faster, because we could just kind of continue testing until we were like very certain, but who knows what would happen then, except for time kind of leaking out. So I said intuition. You might be wondering, what is intuition? It's kind of like a loose, vague term. I feel like people use it often as an excuse, or just kind of an explanation when they can't quite explain something, when they know something in their gut, or they just want you to believe them and they can kind of continue on with what they're saying. Like, I just feel it in my intuition. But as I understand it, intuition is the ability to understand something instinctively without the need for conscious reasoning. And so in this case, intuition was simplifying complexity. We decided to leave that question out about meditation frequency just because some users thought it was way too early. And we thought that actually helping users to build that habit would be much more important than trying to get them to set this schedule. And intuition also kind of took the form of that gut feeling of like, yeah, even though some people really like those science facts, it's probably too early to educate you on the benefits of meditation if you haven't even done it. I mean, you're already there, you're somewhat sold, we're just going to leave it out. So we thought it would be best to set this expectation a little later on once you had done a couple more sessions. We also decided to remove that sample meditation. Even though some users really liked hearing Andy's voice, again, we thought it was better to get them onboarded, get them set up for success, rather than detracting them and going straight into that session. Because if you'll remember, from those experiments, we saw that that session 1 completion for the animated GIF flow wasn't actually correlated to that week 2 retention. And so we decided to focus on helping users get set up. So to kind of loop back on what is intuition, in the context of design, intuition can take the form of a non-rational pull that can take us on a different path. Or maybe it's an incongruous idea that leads us to a surprising conclusion. This process of listening to users, extracting insights, and understanding what's going on is where the real magic begins. And so the more we repeat this process, the more we can build and develop our intuition. And over time, this skill becomes a competitive advantage because you can move faster and you don't have to wait around for even fast user research to make decisions for you. So now I'm going to walk you through the details of the final flow. First, we start with a warm welcome. We set some context for what's to come. And then we ask you about your experience with meditation. If you're new, we recommend a short duration, 3 minutes, like what we did together. If you're more experienced, we go up to 10. But we allow you to change this. So if you're experienced, but you haven't done it in a while, or maybe you're new and you really want to do 10 minutes, that's fine too. Next, we ask you about your reasons for coming to Headspace. We took that data from the goals study and we kind of saw what people were circling in those user research studies, and we came up with 6 goals. One of them was just checking it out. And that expanded view, it gives you kind of like a bigger snippet about what Headspace has to offer on each of these topics. So from there, we decided to do something really cool. And again, from behavioral science, we know that the best way to create a new habit is to anchor it to an existing habit. So what we did here was we asked users to pick a habit anchor. And that could be something like brushing their teeth, something we already do, or eating breakfast, or going to sleep. And so we kind of had a suggested time there on the bottom. They could change it also. But over time, we hope that that habit anchor would be enough to just remind you to meditate. So every time you brush your teeth, you'll remember, oh, I'm going to go sit down and do the meditation after that. It was our goal that over time we could phase out those push reminders, because there's something a little anti-Headspace about using push reminders to get you on your phone, to get you to meditate. So we end with this recap of what you've told us, and we just encourage you to try your first meditation. Okay, so it took us about 6 weeks to design and build this MVP experience. Our team is just 1 PM, me, the designer, a researcher that's kind of split across a couple teams, and a developer for each platform. And what we saw was a significant increase in that week 2 retention, about 10%. And in addition to that, we saw this 90-day conversion rate go up, so the amount of people who actually bought a Headspace subscription went up. So if you'll remember from earlier, the retention chart I talked about, we were kind of thinking week 2 retention was a leading indicator for conversion, and so it was really nice to see that at least for this experience, it kind of came full circle and both of them went up together. So this was great. We had moved the metric we wanted to, and we had helped the business because we were making money, and we had helped our users. We weren't doing anything shady. So, okay. Before I leave you to lunch, I think it's almost soon, I'm going to go over what we learned. So 1, data can help us understand the past, but it doesn't make decisions for us. It can help us identify opportunities, like that huge drop in week 2 retention, but it can't prescribe the solutions for us. So, user research can help us understand why. It can uncover those insights, and it can kind of provide color to the data. In addition, behavioral science can provide a really nice framework for us to base our solution off of. But what users say can be conflicting. Maybe they don't know what they want, or there's not enough time to do more. So, this is where we lean on intuition. Decision making is at the heart of what we all do. And we're just trying to take all the information available to us and make good, fast decisions. So intuition is what helps us do that. And if you are intentional about how you develop and grow that intuition, it can become a competitive advantage for you, your team, and your company. Thank you.